Hello, my name's Angus Smith and I'm the Choral Ambassador for Tenor and Bell. And I'm delighted to be having a chat with Gareth Treseder, a very, very fine young composer and singer who is just written a piece by the name of Come and Let Us Return Unto the Lord for us, and which we're now launching on our Choral Now catalogue. I think it's an absolutely terrific piece, and I'm using this opportunity to find out more from Gareth about what inspired him to write this particular piece. Gareth, welcome. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you, Angus. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your lovely words.
And Gareth, I happen to know, is at home in South London with his wife and young children. So we're taking the opportunity to have this conversation while the youngsters are either asleep or being looked after. So such is modern life at the moment. But it's terrific to be talking about music and new music that is coming online. That's just wonderful. To cut to the chase, if you follow through to the end of this short chat, then you'll find links to an extremely fine performance of this new piece by Gareth, performed by the Temple Church Choir back in 2019 when it was first heard. And also, if you follow the link to the Choral Now page for Gareth on the Tenor and Bell website, you'll be able to view a sample copy of the piece and follow it through from beginning to end as the Temple Church Choir are singing. So, Gareth, could you just share with us why this text, why this piece, what excited you about writing this music?
Well, the wonderful Roger Sayer of Temple Church Choir and the Reverend Robin Griffith-Jones approached me to write a Lenten canticle for the choir. And we decided upon the text from Hosea 6, verses 1 to 6, "Come and let us return to the Lord." And as I was reading it, there were shades of Comte Irrtöchter from St. Matthew Passion in my mind. So the opening of St. Matthew Passion is the chorus, and of course the orchestra, the double chorus, double choir, singing to each other, "Come, daughters, help me to lament." And when I saw the text in Hosea, that screamed to me the necessity for a double choir and organ, so that you can imagine on a stage or in a church where you've got decani and cantoris on either side, singing to each other in a more joyous way, "Come and let us return to the Lord." But there's also a hint of trepidation about what that might mean, which, i.e., leaving your old lives behind to come back to the Lord's goodness. And this is expressed musically through different changes of key, cluster chords, and the organ's rather not impetuous writing, but sort of that the organist is hurrying the choir along to go and listen to God's word, which is then expressed through the tenor solo's little lecture, if you like, a lesson to the crowds as to how best to turn back to the Lord. And then, so obviously that's the soloist's role, but then the tenor soloist returns to the choir as they take on the role of the Lord and of the angels, telling people, do not be so fickle, come back to us. And then once they have, the crowds have received this divine intervention, again, the divine intervention delivered by the choir, a host of angels and of the Lord himself, they turn to each other and say, right, let us return, let us turn back and lead a much more joyous existence than the one we presently have. And then the opening material returns, but in a more upbeat fashion, now that they found the Lord again. And there is an exultant doxology. There is an organ fugato to express the notion that the organist is returning as well. And the work then ultimately, it concludes with a rather questioning motif, implying that we are all fickle, And even if we return to the Lord, there will still be moments in which we will actually likely turn away again. So it's a joyous text, but it's one that's full of drama. And I felt the best way to express that inherent dramaticism was as many voices as possible.
Yes, I think that comes across particularly clearly when you listen to the piece, insofar that there is a narrative drive to it, and there's a pace about it as well. So it doesn't circle around meaninglessly in any way. I think it's beautifully presented across the span of the piece. I noticed that it is a piece that is most obviously one that could be sung in the time of Lent, but equally, it seems that the messages and the setting would be one that choirs would enjoy singing at any time. I noticed that you made a reference in the introduction to the inspiration that you got from "I Was Glad," Parry's "I Was Glad," and I could easily imagine it being a companion piece to that.
Yes, absolutely. It may be performed at any time during the course of the religious calendar, or indeed in any concert performance. As the work is 4.5 minutes long, it's a fairly substantial choral piece, as indeed "I Was Glad" is approximately 4 minutes in length. And yes, it's the sort of piece that can lend itself very well at any time of the year. And so in "I Was Glad," you've got decani choir and cantorist choir singing to each other. Then you have the middle contemplative section, which as indeed occurs in "Come and Let Us Return to the Lord," before it returns to the opening musical material in a much more, as I said before, in a much more upbeat fashion, much more joyous fashion, rather like "I Was Glad."
I would just make the observation as it so happens that we're both tenors, and I would much rather, to be honest, just for the terms of the stamina and power and energy required, be singing your piece rather than necessarily the Parry too many times, because I don't know how you feel about it, but it always kills me when I have to sing that. Whereas I think actually what you've done is come up with a piece which perhaps began because of your own singing experience, seems very well calculated, so that you don't have to have huge numbers of singers to create the biggest effect. I think it really, in terms of the way you set the words and the writing, the balance, etc., I think it's something that many choirs of quite wide-ranging abilities and size would be able to enjoy.
That's right. Well, that's very kind of you to say. I mean, in Parry's "I Was Glad," as is the case in a lot of double choir works, if one isn't careful, tenor 1 means high and tenor 2 means low. So that's fine, but in "Come and Let Us Return to the Lord," there is much more of a vocal range for each of the tenor sections. And that was one of the many reasons for setting it for double choir, was so that each voice physically could receive have a rest, I suppose, rather than constantly only having a crotchet rest to breathe before having to return to the high tessitura of the range. In this, there's plenty more opportunity for the larynx to relax and to go maybe into the baritonal registers before once more returning to the top notes. So I always tend to write things that I would want to sing. And that's not simply the practicalities of being able to present the work in the performance or in the service, but it's also the practicalities of being able to maintain one's vocal health during a rehearsal. Exactly. So there'll be many choirs that can just pick up the piece and perform it. And there are other choirs that will take lots of opportunities, lots of rehearsals to get the piece going and to ascertain the musical mood, etc., as well as just the notes. So in each of those scenarios, what I've tried to do is write something very accessible in terms of the physicality of the singing, as well as the intervallic structure, whether it's stepwise or simple intervals, or if there is an awkward interval, to have vocal leading so that the sopranos have been singing your note just before you sing it. So it all makes sense.
Yeah, I think that that signposting is perfect, and there's no sense at all of you having to compromise in terms of what you're writing or wanting to express. It's wonderful. Gareth, thank you so much for that. I think what we should do is now allow people to hear the performance, which I say is the Temple Church Choir from 2019, recorded by BBC Radio 3 for choral evensong. Now, the only thing I'll add is that the sharp-eared and eagle-eyed amongst you who are following this may notice that there have been one or two revisions since Gareth wrote the initial version of the score for the Temple Church Choir. Between that date and the publication now, well, I mean, let's be honest, which composer doesn't revise pieces as they go along? And the changes are largely cosmetic, but just in case anybody's curious about that. So Gareth, thank you so much, and I hope very much that we'll have an opportunity to chat again about further pieces you might be doing in the future. But thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure.